Could I start by saying what a great pleasure and honour it is to be here. Every single one of us here has ambition, has dreams. And I think the great secret of life is actually making those dreams happen. And for me, one of those very, very strong dreams was actually to reach the summit of Everest. In the 1970s, the huge southwest face of Everest, arguably the hardest way, was actually a challenge for mountaineers from all around the world. And I actually led my first expedition to the southwest face in 1972. And we didn't succeed, we failed. But at least through that failure, we actually learnt an immense amount. One learns from one's mistakes and one goes on to success. And we did in 1975. Didn't go there myself, and in a way it wasn't my role to do so. My role was actually to make the expedition successful as leader of that expedition. But I still dreamt of going to Everest, and it was in 1982 that I returned to Everest, and we attempted its huge northeast ridge. But we wanted to do it in a very different way from in 1975. In 75, there were 18 climbers, 60 high-altitude Sherpas. In 1982, there were just 4 of us. And very early on, I suspect, we realized that, we were too small a team. We weren't going to make it. And after that, I never thought that I'd go back to Everest again. I'd lost too many friends there. And then this man here came into my life. Arne Næss. He was a multimillionaire, a Norwegian. He climbed as a young man. He then made his fortune in shipping. And now he wanted to return to climbing. We were friends, and he asked me to actually join him and go along as his kind of logistics expert. And I must say, I just couldn't resist it. I spent a year planning the expeditions, and then in the spring of 1985, we were ready to set out. Now, at this stage, we weren't a team. We were just a group of people with a common end. So we were actually going to take something like a fortnight to reach our base camp. And in that walk, we weren't just getting fit. We just weren't just getting acclimatized. We were actually beginning to know each other. We were beginning to build those friendships. And I think in any enterprise that you undertake, friendship and trust are the glue that actually holds a team together. The approach march went on. We're now passing below Pomoria. As soon as we got there, my eyes were drawn to the Everest icefall. And this was the one part of the climb that I dreaded going through. Because in 1972, on our first attempt on the southwest face, at the very end of the expedition, Tony Tai, one of our team members, was killed when an ice wall collapsed upon him. There's no way of making a safe route through the icefall. And each one of those little ripples are a wall that's about the size of a 2- or 3-story house, and they're all going to collapse sooner or later. It took us a week to push the route through the Everest icefall, immediately established a camp at the top there, and immediately the first pair of climbers moved up there with some Sherpas to push the route on. In my planning, I worked on a principle that every day was the last fine day we'd ever get. And so the two of them, with a group of Sherpas, have moved up to Camp 1 now, and they're now going to push the route out, and this is the easy part, up the Western Cwm. Meanwhile, I was still back at base camp. I was actually still doing a logistic role, and our relationship with Arne was an interesting one, because Arne was actually the least experienced of all us mountaineers on the team, and yet here he was leader of the expedition because he'd paid for it. And he was also, though, a very, very good leader. And the reason, I think, was that he was a good listener. He listened, he consulted, but then equally important, he took firm, clear decisions. Anyway, the climb went on, and we were doing the standard South Col route. I actually decided it was high time I got some climbing in, so Bjorn Maralund and I were given the task of actually pushing the route from Camp 3 actually to the South Col itself. And it took us 2 days to run the route out to the South Col. We've actually got the route, so we're ready for that vital summit bid. And so we set out, and as we went up, we saw this figure coming down the fixed ropes quickly. One of the summiters. Have they made it? Have they actually climbed it? And no, they hadn't made it. There was a fierce high wind, the jet stream blasting across the top. It was interesting how natural leaders emerge for the right moment. Ralph Hoybach was the more experienced climber, the older one as well. Young Harvard, brilliant young alpinist. He wanted to go for it, to hell with the wind. But Ralph Hoybach said, no, there's no point. He saw that the Sherpas were worried and concerned by the wind as well. And so they took the sensible decision and they turned back down. And it is so important in climbing to know when to turn back as much as when to press on. And that meant that the next morning when we set out, we didn't rope up. We were all competent mountaineers, and everyone went at their own pace. And inevitably, I was going slower than the others. I was much older. I was 50 years of age, and at that time, no 50-year-old had ever climbed Mount Everest. And I'm sure a lot of people here have had the misfortune to be the last person. Because what happens all too often is the people who've waited for you, who've been there, by the time you catch them up, they're cold, they're impatient, they're bored. And so they jump up and they keep going. So they don't give you, the person who needs a rest more than anyone else, a chance to rest. And this is exactly what happened on that occasion. They jumped up and they pushed on. And I was just totally dispirited. And I just sank into the snow. It was Odd, the team man. And he came over to me, he sat by me and said, look, Chris, there's no hurry at all. I'll wait with you. Just have a rest for as long as you like. I just rested for about 5 minutes and we started up once again. And it was amazing. I think it was that bit of a rest, but I think it was more Odd's concern that kept me going. We caught up with the others before we reached the shoulder of Everest. We're now higher than any other mountain on Earth. And we'd made incredibly good progress. We actually reached the south summit at 7 o'clock in the morning. And by this time, we were so close, I got to the back again. So there I was, by myself. The others had all disappeared from sight. I was about the middle of the Hillary step, and I just lost all my strength. And I didn't think I could make it. And then it was an amazing experience, because suddenly I was aware of Doug Scott, one of my oldest friends, the man who went to the top of Everest in 1975. And Doug was floating by my right shoulder. And Doug talked me up the Hillary step. And then all I had to do was put one foot in front of the other, and suddenly I was on top of Everest. And I just slumped into the snow. I was absolutely exhausted. I've never pushed myself so hard. And it wasn't a joyous moment at that stage, because in those last steps, I couldn't help thinking of the too many friends, many of them on Everest, who'd lost their lives, sometimes on my expeditions. And I cried. And then slowly, I began to realize where I was. I had realized a dream. What was really good was that we ended up by getting 9 climbers and 9 Sherpas to the top of Everest. At the time, that was the largest number of people from a single expedition. It was an affirmation of the fact that if you work together as a team, and okay, if you have some luck with the weather as well, you achieve success. In other words, yes, you want to achieve your end, but it's how you achieve it that is of every bit as great importance. And I built 10 friends for life. And that to me is the most important thing of the lot. Thank you very much indeed.